So I began to turn around, and when I turned around, in my doorway, there was this tall being, and it looked like this dark black. Hello, beautiful souls. I am Aradia Arcanum. Welcome to Arcanum's Dark Light. I'm making this video to share an experience that I've had with you, and it is to address some questions that I usually get about how to connect with a spirit or a being that you may want to work with. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience and then talk a little bit about why I think it was important for me to share this. So I was doing some spell work, and I'm excited because this was a confirmation to some of the things that I'm working with, and I'll share a little bit more about that after I tell you what it was that happened. So I was doing spell work for a client, and a part of that spell work was me creating a sigil for that client. And the sigil, I had incorporated various alchemic symbols, occult symbols, things that I've created, and incorporated it all into this sigil creation. And this was a process that was over the course of several weeks, but more on that later. So during this, when you create a sigil, especially for me, if it's for someone else, I am making sure that I am putting my intent, each stroke of the pen, each stroke of the ink, I am putting my intention into the sigil. So after its creation, I put all of the spell working together, and when it was together, everything was in the process. I then began to charge the sigil, imbuing it with the energy so that the client can use the sigil going forward anytime that they wanted to. So while this was happening, I was in the moment, in the zone. I felt this presence, and that's not an uncommon thing. This is something that happens to me quite a bit. I feel a presence. I commune with spirits quite often, and so this wasn't an uncommon feeling, except when I felt the presence, I knew it was something there, but there was just something a little different about it. So I began to turn around, and when I turned around, in my doorway, there was this tall being, and it looked like this dark black. You know how smoke looks coming out of the flame? Certain smoke looks like very black. And I'm not sure what causes that, depending on whatever burns. Some smoke looks very black, like almost like a soot. So it was this color, tall being, androgynous looking, and it was hairless. It had no hair. And the ears, I remember, I couldn't really see. I just saw a form. And I remember seeing the eyes, almost like the whites of the eyes, because everything was so like pearl, grayish black. And then I remember seeing the lips, and remember seeing the ears. The ears were like elven ears, and the forehead, like the head was kind of elongated and the forehead was kind of big. So this being is looking at me, and I'm looking at it, but it had this curious look on its face. And so then, I'm curious. So I got this curious look on my face, and it's like we're having this standoff, like we're staring. So I didn't sense any fear. I usually, if this is something that is malevolent or like out to cause harm, I would sense that. My alarms would go off. But this wasn't the case. And at least not in that moment. So it disappeared, And I think it was still there, but it kind of it stepped back out of my visual. So I continued to work on the spell. I was like, okay, that was weird. I'll have to address that later. I put that in the back of my mind and continued to finish with the spell. But what happened was later on that night, this was the night that I had the live Zoom Spirit Connect. So I couldn't really focus because the being showed itself again, and I couldn't really channel anything else too much because it kept making its presence known. So then what happened is the next day I'm sharing this experience with people because I'm trying to get some feedback, because this was not a being or an entity that I've ever seen. They usually come, whether they are the same or different, they usually come some type of almost kind of a similar form. So when I was telling, I told my friends, because I was excited, I was like, what is this new being? Some other people that is maybe on a more mundane path, when that happens, they may get a little scared, but I get excited. So I'm telling my husband this, and I begin to tell a story. Halfway in my first sentence, he goes, Jinn. He heard something tell him it was Jinn. So when he said that word, it's like in the movies, I had a playback. I play back to everything that I have been doing for the last few weeks up until this point. Now, this is where I want to share why I'm telling you this story, to answer that question of how to connect to a being, how to get a being or spirit's attention. What happened was, the previous weeks leading up to that moment, I have been working on learning about the symbology, the occult symbols, alchemic symbols, how these are created, the ink used, and a lot of this was within Islamic practices. Magic squares, talismanic writings, all of these things I've been going over, looking at ancient grimoires, different books on how these things are created and the thought processes behind them, what they represented. So I was going through all of this, essentially unknowingly building this connection, creating this atmosphere, creating this frequency that resonates with how one would connect with whatever that being is. So in this case, the Jinn resonates with these frequencies because this is the culture that it is from. So this is the thing. When you want to work with a being, do your research, set the tone, set the familiar grounds. Read some books, play some music, anything that is associated with that being or that spirit. You don't want to wait till it's time for you to do that invocation and call for, like, the candles, do all of that. That comes towards the end. You will have a better success rate if leading up to that moment, it is just like ritual. You do your preparations and gather things, you're doing your research to lead up to when you need to do the ritual. It's the same thing for connecting with a being. You do your research, and because what's happening is your mind is creating these visuals, you're reading, you're beginning to resonate with that era, that culture, and this is setting the tone. All of this is setting the tone. So that's what I was doing. And this is why when my husband had said Jinn, it all connected. All of the dots connected because this is what I was studying for the last few weeks. So evidently I've called forth the Jinn. So it stopped by to see, like, who is this person sending out this frequency? Let me see what that's about, because it's a familiar ground. So I'm excited about that. So I'm going to continue to do the work that I'm doing. And I was doing all of that because I want to go deeper with talisman and sigil creation, because this is something I'm going to be doing for people, and this is something I'm going to be doing for myself, incorporating the creation of sigils in a more artful, in a more way that connects to the ancient cultures, the ancient ways that it was done. So this was my experience, the Jinn. And when you think about it, after, like I said, I went back in my mind and thought about what led up to that moment. I also thought about, when you look at the movies and you see what their visuals are of the Jinn, this is that. This is the head, usually their head is kind of like big, the forehead, and they have these pointy ears. So that's exactly what it was that I saw. And the color was like almost like the smoke from the smokeless fire, but the color of it anyway. So it wasn't, I saw more the color that took form rather than a physical body, but it was very tall. Jinn can take whatever form they choose. If you read a little bit about them, they can take whatever form they choose. So I'm not sure why it took that form. I'm guessing maybe it wanted to let me know that this is what it was. But again, I'm still doing, delving into that, channeling, and just doing some more reading and understanding on not why it showed itself, but just more research, because Jinn can be tricksters. So just like you see in the movies, genies are tricksters. You got to make sure you know what you're doing. So I'm not going to be making any wishes, which is one of the first things that my husband said after he said Jinn. He said, don't you go making any wishes with this Jinn. But I thought that was funny. So I just wanted to share that here with you guys. For those of you that are having difficulties connecting with spirits or beings, spend time leading up to that moment where you are going to actively sit down and invoke that energy. Spend weeks reading and chanting and playing music and lighting incense. Everything that is associated with what this being is associated with. This will help you have a better success rate in contacting and communing with that being. So if you have any questions, let me know. And if you've had any experience with working with a Jinn, I'm also very curious and would like to know what that was like, because this is very new to me and I'm still doing the research on that, but I thought this was something great to share with you guys. So that is it for this video. Until the next video, I love you all, and into the shadows.